It's great to see a nice big group of people again this week, and always nice to have students in the audience, even if they are here under duress. We hope you enjoy this glimpse into the democratic process. I'm Micah Schweitzer from WNIN Public Radio, and it's great to have 5 legislators with us this morning. We have Representative Suzanne Crouch here, Representative Wendy McNamara, Representative Gail Reekin, and Senator Vanita Becker and Senator Jim Toms. So thank you all for being here this morning. Just a couple of items of business before we dive in. Meet Your Legislators is sponsored by the League of Women Voters, the Evansville Teachers Association, Valley Watch, Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Teamsters Local 215, and the Evansville Vanderburgh Public Library, as well as United Neighborhoods of Evansville. If you'd like to get in touch with your legislator, thank you. If you'd like to get in touch with your legislator, you can do so by phone. You can reach House Democrats at 800-382-9842. House Republicans are at 800-382-9841. And the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, 800-382-9467. And if you want to email any of these legislators, you simply put S or H for Senate or House, then their district number at in.gov. We are going to get started in just a moment with legislative updates, but first I would like to invite Leslie Simmons from the League of Women Voters up. We have something special to present this morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Jim Daniels, the League of Women Voters and the other sponsors of Meet Your Legislators and the Legislators would all like to present to Jim Daniels, whom I hope will come up here and receive this award. While he is walking up here, we all know that Jim has been a fearless and excellent leader of this organization of Meet Your Legislators. I will someday learn to pronounce that correctly. I think the number of people here today and who've been attending during the session is a great testimony to all of his organizational skills and keeping this going. And this is a Making Democracy Work award to Jim Daniels for his years of service to this function of Meet Your Legislators. Jim, thank you so very much.
Jim, you got 2 minutes to respond.
And we're timing.
Does this mean you're going to do it my way? That's all I ask. Just do everything I want and everything will be just fine. Thank you very much.
And as Senator Toms said, 2 minutes is the magic number. We'll have 2-minute legislative updates, 2 minutes for you at the microphone, 2 minutes any legislator who wants to respond to the question has 2 minutes as well. And I'll keep track of time and try to help people stick to it. Why don't we start with our legislative updates? And I don't know who wants to go first, or if we just want to go down the table. Any volunteers? Sure.
Thank you, Wayne. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity that we've had for these legislator meetings. Appreciate all the work that you put into these programs, and I want to also thank everybody for being here today and that's been joining us on these occasions as well. Just real quick, I want to say that I did want to point out, I brought some of these along today. If anybody wants some, my wife Margie has them back here. I had those made up. They're really kind of neat. It's Indiana, 1816, and it gives a chronological order of events that took place through the years. And so if anybody wants to take one with them when you leave here, please do so. And I also have some handouts of some of the things I've been involved with the last few weeks on legislation. And I won't just go in depth about some of these things, but been working on some measures to help veterans. And those bills looks like they're going to pass, and I'm sure the governor will sign them. Kind of excited about helping our veterans because I have a vested interest in people in the military. I served myself. I've got a son that's in the military, a daughter that served in the military, and anytime I can help our veterans, the men and women who are willing to dedicate their life to serve our country, I think it's the least we can do to help them in any way, shape, or fashion. So just wanted to say that. A couple of bills we had this past few weeks was interesting, and maybe later on during the discussions it might come up, but it was issues that happen on the local government levels, and sometimes folks feel that the local government should not have the state intervene in their affairs, and I agree with that to some degree, but sometimes occasions come up where some local municipality throughout the state might be doing something that's unfair to the citizens in their particular locality. And so those people, they come to the state for assistance on that. And so some of the bills we hear addresses those kind of concerns. And I'm happy to be involved in that. It's really been enlightening to see sometimes situations that crop up. It might not be something we would see statewide, but occasionally these hot spots that come up where the state itself can affect a bill that will clarify and take measures that protects those citizens in those particular areas. And that happens from time to time, and lately this past week and week before last, we had a couple of those bills. One was with sewer districts, and the other one was with water rates concerning folks in Gibson County. So
we're right at around 2 minutes, right?
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Becker.
Good morning. Again, I appreciate each and every one of you being here this morning and for the opportunity to share some information with you. I'm just going to give you some statistics. As of February the 15th, the Senate had heard 252 bills total between House and Senate. We passed out 208 bills that actually passed out of the Senate committees. We've actually passed 148. And this is really interesting, the percentage of passed Senate bills with bipartisan support. Sometimes at these functions you tend to think that politics, and from what you hear sometimes, that it's very prevalent at the State House. And it is on certain issues, but in the Senate, the percentage of passed Senate bills with bipartisan support was 97%. So that's kind of amazing, and I suspect most people don't really realize that. And then the percentage of passed Senate bills with unanimous support, meaning that everybody voted for them, both Democrats and Republicans, was 59%. So I just wanted to share some because I think that's kind of interesting. When you hear about some of the divisive issues, that's really what makes the press and the media. But there's a lot of other things that we deal with. And one of them that I'm working on is a House bill that came over from Representative Milo Smith. And it's a bill that deals with mopeds and redefining mopeds and registering mopeds. And also in the Senate, we passed an amendment to require that mopeds also have insurance on them. If people are going to drive on city streets, then they ought to be required to carry insurance. I ran into a buzzsaw last year on second reading. It has passed on second reading in the Senate, so we'll see. I think we don't require a driver's license, but we do require either an identification card from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles or a driver's license. So we'll see what happens with that. I know I have to thank, we had 2 police officers from the Evansville Police Department that came on Tuesday and testified before the Senate committee as to what a problem that the mopeds are. And just think about it, mopeds can do damage to property, they can do damage to other vehicles, just like a vehicle can. Maybe not as extensive, but there was some of the pictures and some of the accidents reported. This one elderly woman, the rear end of her car was hit by a motorcycle. It did $3,000 worth of damage to her car. And she didn't have the money, and he didn't have insurance, and therefore she was in a pickle. She got hit twice. Not only was she hit, but she also then wasn't able to get her car fixed as well. So that's just some of the things that we're working on. The other bill that I've worked on, one of them extensively, is Senate Bill 52, which has passed both the House and Senate. We will now go to conference committee to work out differences. There was an amendment put on the bill. This deals with HIV testing to ensure that more people have access to testing, to ensure that they get the help that they need. We have a lot of HIV programs throughout the state that help people, and people live a lot longer than they used to with HIV, and so this will ensure earlier testing and also earlier treatment, which will also result in a lot longer lives.
Thank
so
you
those
very
are just
much.
some of the things. I think my time is up, so I'll move on.
Senator, rather Representative Regan.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Do I need to bring this closer? Okay. Thank you. Good morning. And again, thank you to the League. And also, it's great to see so many people that show up at our Meet Your Legislators. I don't know if that's the situation everywhere, and it's really does feel good to see the interest here locally. I want to touch on a few things, and I've written some notes so I don't forget them. We're down toward the end of this session, and things are going fast and furious, and they will until March 9th, which I understand might be the date at which we end. Education first. We haven't seen those expansive changes this year, those reforms, but there is something that came through on Thursday. The House Education Committee inserted in an amendment into Senate Bill 413 that would allow science teachers the ability to present, in quote, objective data regarding global warming and evolution. So that will be coming to Monday as a committee report, and we'll see what happens on second reading. But that's reinvigorating that issue of creationism, probably or possibly, that we thought was going to leave us for this particular session. As well, and I won't talk about this as much, but I understand the turnaround language is back somewhere. So perhaps one of the representatives more familiar might talk about that. Child protection became very involved in child protection issues this last week. The Department of Child Services has come under scrutiny regarding child abuse and neglect, and I do have copies of some of the articles that are out there on the table from Indianapolis Star and South Bend, and not a whole lot of reporting been going on locally. But I have tried to amend 286 to study the centralized hotline system, and that was not entertained in committee. I spoke on it on the floor, and I'll continue to press to see that we can study not only the hotline but the entire system. It would be nice if we can get an audit. Chairman Noe has pledged to study the committee informally. There's a letter that will go to all the members of the House and I hope the Senate, but it's simply to ask them of any issues, concerns out there that they have to report back to several people, and hoping maybe as many folks that want to get on an informal committee might do that, that we can at least look into the issues, the hotline and its success or failure, or how you can improve it as well. I know Senator Toms hasn't talked about it, but he's initiating a bipartisan effort to have officials of the hotline visit Evansville to meet with anyone that they want to talk about the hotline and how it works. So that we really are going to see some attention. I will still press for an independent audit, as well as some of my colleagues will, because I think that's the best way to really learn about the system. I
know you have more things, but
are we
we're out
2
of time.
minutes?
Yep.
Well, thank you so much.
All right.
Sure. Last time I was here, I spoke about House Bill 1365, which is a bill I carried called the Juvenile Jurisdiction Bill, and it was heard this week in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I was happy to see that it passed out of the committee and is available for second readings in the Senate. And what it does, it provides juveniles tried as adults and then convicted as adults the opportunity to be placed in an appropriate setting based on their age and the crime that they did. And this stems from a case up in, I believe, around South Bend of a 12-year-old who had was convicted of murder, and he was the size of a 10-year-old. The only place in Indiana that we had the option of or DOC, I should say, had the option of placing a juvenile who had done something like that is a place up in Wabash called Youth Incarcerated as Adults. And it gave them no other options. And when they're incarcerated there, they don't receive the same services that juveniles would in a juvenile detention facility. And so what this bill does, it allows the courts to look at the situation and allows the DOC to appropriately place youth and review those cases. About 32 other states currently have the concurrent jurisdiction, and we are just coming up to the point where we can include that as well. Also, something to focus on is the inheritance tax exemption being phased in. I believe it's in final stages right now, and maybe Suzanne will speak to that. And then real quick, this month, February, has been Heart Awareness Month, and all of the women of the legislature have been trying to draw attention to heart disease in women, and some of us you'll see with the red dress on, and we want to draw awareness to this disease that kills millions and millions of women every year very silently. If you'd like to know more about that, the website is goredforwomen.org, and you can learn more about it, but I didn't want February to get past us without drawing some attention to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to take my time excuse me, to kind of explain where we are in the process, what's happened, and what still can happen in the next 2 weeks. In the month of January, the Senate heard their bills, the House heard their bills. And beginning of February, then the House bills went over to the Senate and vice versa, because in order to become law, a bill has to pass both houses. Now, the Senate can obviously make changes to the House bills and vice versa, and if that happens, then the bill has to come back to where it originated, and the author has to either concur with the changes that the other house made, in which case it's ready to move on to the governor's desk after it receives a vote by the body, or that author can dissent. And that's the process that's going on right now. If an author dissents, then that means that that bill is going to go to conference committee, and there's going to be a Republican and Democrat from the Senate and a Republican and Democrat from the House that'll sit down and try to iron out differences. Now, what's important for people to understand is they believe, most of us believe, that when a bill passes one house, and if it doesn't get a hearing in the other house, that bill is dead. And that is not the case. When a bill passes one house, even if it doesn't get a hearing in the other house, that language is alive until we sine die on March 9th. So that means that that language could be put into a conference committee, go to a conference committee and be inserted into another bill. So at this point, really, wouldn't you agree, senators? I mean, everything's still kind of alive, and there was a bill that Senator Becker had, Senate Bill 203. It had to do with dental services, and it came over to me in the House. The chairman of the insurance committee heard it, but he didn't vote on it, and he said he had no intention of moving it forward. That language is still alive and could be put into a similar bill sometime between now and the end of the session. Of course, that would have to be approved by both houses in order for that language to be intact. But I just want you all to understand that if you're following a bill out there, the only bills that are dead are bills that never got out of one house or the other. Anything else is still in play until March 9th. So it's extremely important that you continue to contact us on issues that are important to you, because there's still opportunity to address areas on behalf of you. And thank you all very much. I'm going to have to leave a few minutes early, but again, thank you for being here, and thank you for all your input, and please continue to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now it's your turn. And the way this works is, if you'd like to ask a question, you can go to the back table and just fill out one of these slips. We're going to avoid having repeats, so I know we have a few duplicates here, so we will hear all the issues, but we won't hear multiple questions on the same issue. You have 2 minutes at the microphone, and we'll start with a question from Christopher Miller. This is about the Affordable Health Care Act.
Can I take this? Thanks for hearing my question. Being that this is Heart Awareness Month, actually, I'm very concerned about what's going on with the healthcare system, and I was curious about what your guys' ideas are to try to help basically people like myself out. Just graduating college, I'm currently a grad student. I do have a heart condition. I just recently purchased insurance, but it does not cover the treatment I'll need to see my specialist. It's just basically, if I get into a car accident, they'll take care of me. And I have I can't even fathom being able to pay for this out of pocket, being that the tests alone are about $4,000 every 2 years. So I have about a year and a half to get some sort of insurance, and I was curious where we're going with this healthcare system. Thank you.
To start preparing and looking at implementing, when that system, we get all the directives we need from the federal government. So while we're moving ahead and planning for it, there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of what the federal government is going to allow states to do or direct us to do. Interestingly enough, there is a joint committee hearing between, I don't think the Senate's involved with that, are you, Senator Becker? I think it's just the House Health and Insurance Committee this coming Wednesday. So if you don't know about it, it's probably just a joint House Health, Public Health, and Insurance Committee meeting this coming Wednesday at 1:30 in order to get an update on what's happening. And I would encourage you, if you have access to the internet, that perhaps you could watch it because that will be streamed live. And certainly, if you have any questions while you're watching it, if you email them to me directly at scrouch@iga.in.gov. I'll be happy to ask the questions as we are meeting.
Other responses? Yeah, Representative Regan.
The only thing I might say for you now, and I don't know about income level or anything, but we do have Healthy Indiana Plan. It's closed. There are opportunities. It's opened up every once in a while for single adults without children, but it's called HIP, and it might be a place also to probably mention that we do have a surplus in our rainy day fund, if you want to call it, and this might be an appropriate place to put it, where we can open up the Healthy Indiana Plan to young people again. Thank you.
And that was going to be my suggestion, is that you contact, and if you want to, you can get an application from any of us for the Healthy Indiana Plan. They do have limits when they stop taking people, and it is based on income, but it is a way that Indiana, we have used the tobacco settlement funds and tobacco taxes to help fund that program. And it's one also that the governor has asked the federal government to look at. They have so far not agreed to do this, but we could use that program to help us with the federal requirements if the feds would approve that, because we're already offering those services, and a lot of it is preventative services. That's one of the critical pieces of the Healthy Indiana program. And you do pay premiums, but they are based on income, and they're much lower than other insurance. So I would encourage you to also follow up on that. And the other thing I would ask is that you, if you haven't done this, is we have 2 hospitals here, and they do have various programs for people that don't have the wherewithal to pay for a lot of their treatment. I mean, you have to ask for them. You have to talk to the hospital about your funding options. But there are some programs, healthcare for the indigent, that is offered through some of the both hospitals.
Okay, Representative McNamara.
They've all given you some really great suggestions. I just want to offer, if you have trouble navigating those waters or need any help, please contact me or the others up here, and we'll be happy to help you. And if you have time afterwards, just give me your contact information and we can see what we can do to help you. Thank you.
Okay, our next question comes from Fred Cook, and this is a question about Vectren.
Senator Becker, with so many people out of work and having to decide whether or not to pay rent or medication, why would you vote for a veteran to receive a pay hike?
For a veteran to receive a pay hike.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I misunderstood it. I thought I seen in the paper where you voted in favor of them getting a rate hike.
Last fall, when we asked for Vectren to have a hearing in Evansville on their rate increase, and I actually spoke at that hearing against their rate increase. So no, you've been misinformed. But that's okay. It gives me an opportunity to clarify the issue. Legislators are not. We're not on the IURC. The Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission is the one that decides whether or not a utility company receives a rate hike or not. And the rate hike that was actually proposed, Vectren did not get. Now they're appealing that decision, and they may end up receiving part of it, but so far they did not.
Just to add to that, kind of an update. Did I turn that off? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Just as kind of an update, last month I requested information from Vectren regarding the arrearages and shutoffs, how their programs really are working, and asked them to study a couple other programs from other states. They should be getting back to us. I've asked a couple of times for updates. We really do need to look at the entire energy issue. It includes syngas, which I'm sure there's some folks here that are looking at syngas. It includes all those who can't and over the long period of time won't be able to pay their bills. And then it includes the fact that we are the highest in the state. So we really continue to look at those issues. You haven't heard a whole lot lately, but I am waiting for them to return and get their information back to me before I can go further. Thanks.
Okay, moving on. Question from Carol Braden Clark having to do with registered child care ministries safety standards.
I know in the past year there's been legislation introduced to have basic safety standards applied to registered child care ministries, and it hasn't made it, and basic safety standards would include running water in a facility that cares for children. And my question is basically, is anybody going to introduce, or is there anything that is in the works right now to bring this issue up again in light of what happened this week in Indianapolis?
For the question, I don't know if all of you or any of you saw the Star article about the tragedy at a church-related daycare ministry where a child died, and it was posted this week. The problem has always been, and I have supported it in the past every time I've had the opportunity, I believe that regardless of whether you are a church ministry, daycare facility, or privately run, that they should all have to meet minimum safety standards. But currently, church-related ministries do not. And there was a bill filed this year that at least has a committee, and it's pretty much designated. It was Senator Holdman's bill, but it doesn't really have any requirements. All this bill does is actually set up a committee along with the licensed child care group to have church-related ministries as a part of that committee, or actually their own committee, which doesn't go nearly far enough. But, there are churches throughout the state, all over the state, and many of them do support, and many of them choose to be licensed. The daycare center at Methodist Temple is licensed. They choose to be licensed, and they meet all the criteria of any other licensed daycare center, and all of the minimum plus beyond. They go beyond what is actually required, and that brings them up to, they have different levels that they're designated by, depending on the type of programming they offer, as well as the safety measures that they have for kids. And so the Methodist Temple is one of those that choose to have. There are other church-related ministries throughout the state that choose to be licensed, but then there is an awful lot of them that choose not to be. And some of the conditions that we have seen last year was a bill that unfortunately was not taken a vote in the Health Committee by Senator Pat Miller. She refused to give the bill a vote, And I will just tell you that those people have tremendous lobbying power. I know you're used to thinking about the Chamber of Commerce and the ISTA and some of the other groups as being major in the insurance industry, which they all are. They're all the banking industry. I mean, they're all major lobbying forces. But I can also tell you that the group that speaks on behalf of church daycare ministries has a very effective lobby, and they have prevented any such movement going forward over the years. And we've had those bills in the House and the Senate.
Thank you, Senator.
So maybe that tragedy, though, Carol, will prepare people or propel them to make some changes. I just think that all facilities that care for kids ought to meet basic health and safety standards.
I think Senator Thomas wants to jump in, then we'll have Representative Rican.
Senator Holman sits next to me on the floor, and I think even last year he had a measure, something along those lines. But and I support what he's trying to do. I know the opposition last year was folks were claiming that this would increase the cost of those daycares, and it would hurt people who are limited on incomes to be able to have a place to take their children for during the day. But one of the things that was brought out last year and this year as well is that some of these people can get these licenses and they apply as though they are a faith-based group or something, and actually it could just be a husband and wife that opens up shop and has conditions like you described where it's not where you'd want a child to stay all day long. So I appreciate Senator Holman's quest on trying to correct this situation in Indiana, and it's not forgotten about. It's an ongoing thing, and I'm sure that eventually, it takes time sometimes, but hopefully that we'll get standards established that's fair and equitable for all of them.
Just to clarify, in this situation, if I'm correct, it's where the child was in the room. It wasn't an abusive situation. The child was able to leave the room and went to another room in the church, and there was a small pool of water about 2 feet deep, and the child drowned. That's how that. So it was a neglect situation, and I do think that basic safety would have prevented that. So. Absolutely, I think that we do need regulations. Thanks.
I don't know. Senator Becker may remember this, and some of the others may. Has this ever been in study committee?
Oh, yes.
It has in summer study committee?
Oh, yes. It's been studied. It's been recommended by the study committee, by the Child Care Coordinating Study Commission, yes. And they're an ongoing group that meets, and it's comprised of legislators. It is strictly the lobbying force behind that has prevented anything from moving forward on this.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. A question next from Janet James about campaign money.
My name is Janet James. Every party that runs for an office, I believe they're doing the best they can for their country. And when they do that, they get a lot of campaign money. I believe that every dollar should be taxed 5 cents on their campaign money to go towards our national debt. And I believe if there's any foreign money in there, whether it's from corporations or individuals, it should be taxed 10 cents on every dollar. And campaign money that's sitting in coffins is not being used. After 15 years, they vote every 4. That's 3 legislative sessions to vote on. You know, you get to run every 4 years. After 15 years, if you got campaign money left in your coffin, every bit of that should go on our national debt. I do not want to see this passed on to my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And I feel, and this sounds terrible, that the politicians made this debt, no matter what reason, if they're trying to help us or not, then this money should come out of their campaign. I wrote President Obama, Vice President Biden, and he wrote back and said his job was to answer for Obama too, and Mitch Daniels, Mike Pence, and I've talked to Jim. Not one of them has disagreed, but nobody said, yes, I'm going to support it, but I got the idea a couple of them would, and I would like to see this be enacted. Thank you.
Thank you. That's certainly a novel idea. that I've not heard before. And I think, as often happens, we feel the effects of the national issues, and we have a responsibility to try to work with our congressional and senatorial counterparts to address issues. And certainly, I agree with you. I think the debt is frightening, and I think at this point in time, every option should be looked at. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, and I'll certainly broach that subject with my congressional and senatorial representatives.
How do the rest of you feel?
Sure.
Thanks, Janet. Well, I mean, it makes sense what you're talking about, but you're asking the people that watch the hen house to make that decision. And and I think you're talking about all political levels, local, state, and federal. That's a point made. I know there's been comments at the State House. I've heard some senators talk about some of the people in their areas have suggested things along those lines. I just wish that as a government, and I'm talking all governments, I'm talking local and state and federal, that folks that serve would be cost conscious about what they do while they were serving, and what bills they support and what measures they take on. And I realize that today that we have so many programs that assist people and help people, and I understand those things are costly, and anybody that suggests that we roll back the cost, the price on that, then folks are outraged that we're going to reduce the support for those programs. But at some point, all of us have to be aware that we're all responsible for what we do. And I think government should operate just like we all operate with our own budgets at home. And I think one of the things that we fail in this country at every level is that sometimes we take on programs and projects that maybe it would be better if we could just save a little money up front for those things rather than starting something pockets inside out and hoping for money to come in to pay for it, or a tax that we may introduce in a future date. If we was just a little bit more frugal about how we spend the people's money, that would be a big step.
Sure. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think I think it might be a good idea, but I think I'd like to start with the super PACs at the federal level that put in multi-millions and billions of dollars into campaigns throughout the country. They're involved right now in the presidential race. You're going to see, I don't know how the president would feel about taxing his campaign funds, but I suspect that before it's over, both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats, will spend over $1 billion in this next presidential race. And so I don't know what the legalities of it would be, but I think it's certainly one way that we could try to address the federal deficit. I think probably something that should be more important and would, we spend too much money on campaigns, period. And we campaign too long, especially for the presidential elections. And for that, I'd like us to look at what England has done. England does not, they have limits on the amount of money and the time frames involved in those campaigns as well. And I have always been a proponent of campaign reform, but in a way that uses and comprises less money, not more. And I think the Supreme Court decision on the super PACs is abomination. It's wrong, and it just makes the office at the presidential level, and those people can get involved in any race they want to, local, state, federal, and they don't even have to say who, they don't even have to disclose all of their contributors, and I just think that that's wrong. Anyone that gives us over $100, we have to disclose. It's part of our campaign finance report. They do not. So I think it's wrong, and but unfortunately it's going to take federal changes to make that a possibility.
Thank you. Yeah.
I agree with all the sentiments that have been expressed so far, and I most closely align with Senator Becker on the taming of the campaign funds as they are. I think if we look at it from a standpoint of Indiana as being a leader, Indiana does not have debt. We are thankful to be in Indiana and not be Illinois because we have a balanced budget. We are not in debt, and if there were to be a balanced budget in the Constitution, or we look at the federal government requiring them to tame themselves, we might be able to begin to start to tackle that debt. But if we look at Indiana, we're doing things right and have been doing things right when it comes to debt. But certainly I agree with you 100%. Campaign financing and campaign spending and funding is exorbitant. But thank you for bringing your opinion and your interest to us.
Yes.
Very interesting. I'm sitting here thinking about, we all we think we raise a lot of money, but in the game, it's really not a lot of money what we maybe locally hear. But there's certainly some interest, and I think it's worth discussion and looking at the dollars and cents. I'm not sure I agree of the 10% and the 5%, why the difference or something, but it's something to look at it. The foreign money, I don't like that, period. So we ought to prohibit that. I mean, I wouldn't accept. But I don't agree with that at all. But the 5%, it's an interesting concept.
Okay, our next question is from Patty Ozer, if I'm pronouncing that right. This is about funding for rural public transportation.
My name is Patty Ozer, and I want to talk to you about rural public transportation in southwestern Indiana. Particularly something called WATS, the Warwick Area Transit System. This system is operated by SID/Ride Solution. Ride Solution is the grant holder for this particular public transit funding in this area, and they serve a 10-county area. Particularly WATS began, as you can see from the statistics you have there, in August of 2010. A group of local people got together prior to that and formed what was called the Transportation Advisory Committee, set out a vision for what they'd like to see in terms of rural public transportation in the area. And we've been very, very successful in building this system. And the WATS system consists of 4 routes, 2 in Newburgh, 1 in Chandler, and 1 in Boonville. And all 4 of those routes join and link with the MET system at ITT Technical Institute off of I-164. And so what we essentially have done is created a regionalized system of transportation where somebody from Boonville can get to USI to go to school if they need to. And as you can see from the statistics on the chart there, we are projecting to provide over 22,000 rides next year based on what we've done so far. I think that's phenomenal for our system that's only been in place less than 2 years. So we're just asking that you take a look at the statistics there. Within 8 months, this system grew 142%. So I think that's a testament to the need that's out there. And my understanding of public transit funding is that it has to be looked at every year. And we're just asking for your continued support for that public transit funding dollars. Thank you.
Analyzing issues like this, I think that we need to think in terms of regions and a lot of things we do, not just transportation, but energy included. And this makes a lot of sense.
I just want to applaud the efforts of this program because I think it's very important and it will help to get people from Newburgh to Evansville. A lot of people do work here and live there, and so I think this is an extremely valuable program and certainly will do anything I can to help. I know that you do receive some funding, but it's also it's always a struggle, and you want to make sure that it continues to be there.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Do you receive state monies that you're concerned about losing?
Yes, what Right Solution does, the SIT Corporation Right Solution does.
They receive the monies from the state? Okay.
Right Solution receives state money.
Okay.
They're the operator of the system.
All right.
Just to follow up, how much, what percent of your budget is state money? Do you know off the top of your head?
You know, I don't represent Ride Solution. I actually represent the local transportation advisory committee, so I don't know that I could answer that accurately.
Okay.
I can give you the names of some folks that could answer that question for you.
Okay.
You might email us and let us
Yeah.
know if there's a specific funding source that you're concerned about. Might give us just a little bit more information, and we'll be happy to look into it for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. I do support that too. I know not everybody can afford vehicles or insurance, and especially with gas prices, it's probably going to continue to climb. And that's one of the reasons probably why we see so many of these mopeds and scooters on the roads anymore, because folks just don't have any other way to, get around. I think this would be nice that we can expand on this here for the folks that right now are riding those scooters and driving cold rain and have no other way to get to places. So. At one time in our country, we had a lot of public transit, and it worked well. You see these old movies and stuff, and you wonder sometimes, I know that the proliferation of automobiles, and everybody likes to have their own cars, but maybe it's time to really study about expanding on this and allowing people to have another way to travel from in their own area. So thank you.
Okay, Jim Daniels has a question about canned hunting.
Just remember, I'll quote
Even
Phil
for
Hoy.
you.
I've got dramatic pauses that last longer than 2 minutes. First, couple of quick comments. As long as there's money and politics, there's going to be corruption. So unless we start to publicly finance campaigns, we're always going to have a serious problem. Second thing, I didn't realize that the creationism has come back. We'll do a real quick one on that. Teaching creationism as science is moronic. Please vote against that. Now to canned hunting. We thought this was dead also. It's House Bill 1265. It did pass the House. I was informed that Senator Long, the Speaker of the President of the Senate, was going to basically not give it a run, but it did get appointed to Judiciary Committee, so that's where it is right now. As of Thursday morning, I don't know what the schedule is for that committee, but as of Thursday morning, it was still in Senate Judiciary. So the problem with canned hunting is first of all, it's not even hunting. The closest way to describe it is kind of like going to the zoo and shooting animals in the zoo. It's exactly what it is. Animals get drugged. They get picked because of their antlers from the internet. They get hauled behind a fence, turn a guy loose with a high-powered rifle, and he's standing on the other side of the fence most of the time, but sometimes he does go in the fence, and he will shoot the animal, usually while it's still drugged and can't hardly walk. Sometimes the animals can barely stand up. And it requires quick movement from the handler of the animal so he can get out of range to allow the shooter to shoot the animal before the animal falls over by itself. And they call this hunting. It's terrible. So hopefully it won't make it out of Senate Judiciary, but if it does, I will ask the senators to vote no on whatever House Bill 1265 turns into as a number. Thank you.
Okay, now I haven't been to some of these facilities, and they got them throughout the state. I think in the northern part, there's a lot of the Amish have set these ranges up.
They grow the animals.
Okay, now, but I want to say something in all fairness. Okay, and I'm not defending it or I'm opposing it either. I just want to clarify for folks. Okay, that's one viewpoint, but I don't think it's quite accurate. These facilities, I've been told. I haven't been to them, but I've talked to a lot of people that have been to them. I've talked to a lot of people at the Senate level on this. Okay, you're going to cut in on me, aren't you?
Nope, not yet.
All right. That some of these are like 350, 400-acre facilities. Okay, they are enclosed, but I've had people that's visited them told me that they've spent hours there and never seen any animals because of the dense coverage, and that the animals that are there are well kept. They have escape routes. They have places that they can go. It's not like you might think where you're shooting them at the zoo, that it's a wide open field of maybe a 25 by 25 foot pen, that you could spend a day there and still not kill a deer. That these animals are well cared for. They're disease free. There's been heavy investments in these kind of facilities. One of the things to keep in mind about this, Jim, and I know folks that don't like hunting, and I'm not trying to impose hunting on anyone, but anymore we have so much urban sprawl. We have all of the developments that's going on. There are not a lot of places anymore for a father to take his son or his daughter to go hunting anymore. Some of these places that they used to go, these fields are wide open now, and they're off limits for hunters. And so those families that want to continue the generations of hunting, they have to go somewhere. They got to have some place to go to. And so these kind of facilities do offer that, and it's controlled. The individuals that have these kind of facilities want to make sure that it is a sport, and that it is well cared for, and it does generate a lot of revenue. There's people that even come from other parts of the country to come into some of these facilities to hunt these animals, because there are prize game in these places. But just don't leave here with the imagination that it's shooting fish in a barrel. It's simply not true. There is a little more fair hunt than what you might imagine.
And that's time. Thank you.
Okay.
Some of these do have 10 to 15 acres. They're still behind a fence. Animals have escaped, and it's incorrect to assume that they're disease-free. Some of the animals come from other states. We haven't had a CWD, or chronic wasting disease, problem so far in Indiana, but Michigan, Wisconsin, some northern states have. Those states have lost $500,000 plus in revenues because it's destroyed regular, what I call really hunting. I'll be glad to show you the video of exactly what I described, of shooting, leaning the gun on the fence and making sure that the handler gets out of range.
And maybe this is something that could be continued via email or something. Yeah, Senator Becker.
Anyway.
I was just going to say, Jim, was the bill posted for a hearing on Thursday at all? Do you know?
Didn't see that, no.
If it wasn't posted, just because it's in judiciary, if it hasn't been posted, the committee's ended this last week. So if it hasn't been posted in the Senate for a hearing, and while the language is alive, as Representative Crouch indicated earlier, it may still be alive because it did pass the House. The Senate looks does not look very well upon bills that come back that the committee chairman did not hear. And it is my understanding, and I don't know if many of you belong to a sports group, but it's my understanding that the professional sportsmen do not consider this hunting, and that they are opposed to this as well. So it's not like they don't want to hunt, they just don't think that this is fair hunting when an animal is behind a fence and you can just go and kill it right there. So I mean, that's not really so for those of you that might be members of a sportsman's group, and I know a lot of people, and I've never hunted, but I've eaten some deer, so I've been part of it that way only, but I certainly support hunting. And so I don't, but I don't have a problem with that. But I do think it ought to be fair hunting, and I don't think that this is.
Moving on. Okay. A question from Larry Samples about the status of pseudoephedrine legislation.
At the last session, we mentioned Sudafed, that it didn't get out of a committee hearing, but you did mention maybe a chance for move to a local law, where we could pass a local law to make Sudafed a prescription item. What's the status of that legislation?
I know Representative Bacon's not here, but I did try to look for a bill that we could have amended his language into, and actually found a bill, but then he came to me and said that the author did not want the language in his bill. So we backed off because it hasn't passed either house. So my guess is it's probably dead for this session. I do think there's merit in allowing local communities. I saw a very interesting news report on Channel 25 Thursday night about a state, and I can't think of it, was it Mississippi, how they had opposed this language for a long time as far as the prescribing of, requiring a prescription of Sudafed or ephedrine products by a physician. And I know that doctors have a concern about that because they say it does help with colds and sinus infections and things like that. So there's always two sides. I've always found in legislation sometimes there's more than that. There's 3 or 4. But they opposed it for a long time. But they did go to this, and it had the head of the Senate or the House had opposed it, voted against it, but they were able to pass it. And they have found that their meth problem has just almost gone by the wayside as a result of this legislation. So that was a very interesting story, and I think probably in the long run something like that will eventually happen here in Indiana, or giving them the local option to decide that issue. But it's not going to happen this year.
And Representative Crouch, I believe you've got something to add.
Actually, Senator Becker took the words right out of my mouth.
All right. Yes.
I would just add that we might get a break. You know, we were very concerned about what would happen in Kentucky. And I understand if they actually went ahead and did schedule pseudoephedrine. And I understand that at least for this point that bill's been taken off the schedule. So we may have another year, and we need to continue to tell people about our stories. And I think there is more support throughout the state. I know that folks don't really like local control, but that may be something we could end up doing. But actually, the idea of seeing whether or not the tracking system proves to lessen the number of labs, and remember that's where we were attacking it here locally, was the number of labs. I don't think it's going to have any effect at all. And that will be our strongest argument next year, is that the tracking system does not help us.
The tracking doesn't work in Vanderbilt County.
Mm-mm.
Yes, Senator Thomas.
Thank you. Probably the local option would be has a better chance, and the reason I say it is because throughout the state, not every part of the state has the meth problems we have down here. But also, I watched that Mississippi report as well. Now, they were talking about the meth labs that diminished as a result of that, but I don't know what and Oregon was another model state that was used, but I've never heard the statistics of meth use in those. I've never seen reports of the decline in meth use because it's such an addictive drug. I can't imagine if we'd pass a law that would make this prescription that those meth users are going to just pull up the covers at night and go to bed and say, well, we can't have meth no more. I think they'll find that it's such an addiction, they'll find other ways, whether they get it ready-made from Mexico or they get the ingredients from Mexico or other parts of the world. Or if it'd be just strong-arm burglaries at pharmacies and daytime robberies. I don't know. My concern is, again, I fully understand the dilemma we're dealing with here, that we have a society of people that's willing to abuse their body with such a horrendous concoction. But, just this past week, I was talking to one of the pharmacists yesterday about, on prescription medicine on this, and he said that he has himself made the decision not to issue that cough medicine without a prescription. Now, he's made that decision himself. And not to cut you off there, but I said, well, what would a person do if they were out of town or something? He said, well, you'd have to go to St. Mary's or Deaconess or something and get a prescription and then come to him. Here's where I have a problem with this here. As bad as I want this resolved, folks that depend on this cough medicine for its legitimate purpose, for that product that does what it's supposed to do, and I got to tell you, this week, as you can tell, we was up in Indianapolis, and I tell you what, this come on me in the middle of the night. And the next day, Margie was able to go to a CVS store, I think, and get me this medicine. But what do you do when you're traveling? You're away from home, and you need this medicine to get a good night's sleep with it, open up your nose so you can breathe. What does a person do? Find a doctor, try to get a phone call put in. I'm really concerned about what we do in government, where we punish good people for people's bad actions. That's where I have a problem. I wish our country, I wish our state of Indiana had the backbone to address punishing the people that use this kind of medicine, that use this kind of drugs, that make this stuff. I would rather, folks, I got to tell you, at home, when I done something wrong, my dad didn't paddle my brother, he paddled me. You understand what I'm talking about here? I would rather focus on what is we can do here as a state that makes it so bad that you wouldn't want to get caught using that stuff. That we could make it so bad that we could put that medicine right back on the shelf where it was a few years ago, where the people that have a severe head cold can get off work and go home and get that cough medicine and go home and take it. We could do that if we had the stomach for it.
And that's time, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Just a brief response. Doctors call in prescriptions nowadays, so it wouldn't require an office visit. They could call that in.
Larry, no, they won't. No more. Doctors won't do that no more because they're not willing to take the risk. My own doctor will not give me a prescription over the phone anymore, and he knows that's well. So that's not true, Larry.
Well, I work in a pharmacy. We do a lot of prescriptions daily by phone and fax and electronic.
We have a response from.
And also, there are hundreds of other products over the counter that could be used. If you combine Sudafed with Tylenol or Sudafed with ibuprofen, the meth people don't want that. They want the pure Sudafed. So there are hundreds of other products that could be used that are over the counter.
They don't work as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next question from Jody Rogers about House Bill 1367, which has to do with deaf parents communicating with blind and deaf children.
I would like to ask if parents don't know sign and they have a child that is deaf and blind, how would they be able to communicate if House Bill 1367 passed? They need to learn sign language. The parents would need to learn how to communicate with their children. So that's a question that I have and a concern that I have.
Representative McNamara, why don't we start with you?
1367 passed out of the House probably about 3 weeks ago. As I understand it and as I'm recalling it, it right now currently services for deaf are held under the Indiana School for the Deaf, and what this bill 1367 would do would create under the Office of Offices of Management Budget, a consolidated school for addressing issues for not only deaf but for those that are hard of hearing, and it expands the options to all folks that go just beyond signing. This bill was when it came to me, I was struck because as I was walking into the chamber one day, it was the day after the testimony on the bill that had been heard in the House. And as I'm walking into the chamber, several deaf individuals were walking out with tears in their eyes. And I didn't hear the bill. I wasn't on the committee, and I wasn't exactly sure what had transpired to make that happen. And so when this bill came up on the House floor, I had taught at Bosse High School for 10 years, and in my classes I have, periodically throughout the years, I would have had deaf students with interpreters in the classroom. So I contacted, who's become one of my really good friends, the interpreter for my class, and I was texting back and forth with her as this bill was being heard, because I was truly trying to understand what this bill meant and what it meant for the deaf in Indiana. What I ultimately ended up doing is I supported the bill. I voted for it because I understand that the deaf school in Indianapolis does wonderful things, provides wonderful things. But what this does is expand the opportunities for all hard of hearing. all deaf in the state of Indiana. And ultimately, that's why I lent my support to it. But I was very cognizant of the feelings that she expressed to me in our rabid texting back and forth, that she felt that the deaf felt like they were being treated as second-class citizens. And I truly hope that that was never the intention of the bill. That was never the purpose of the bill. The purpose of the bill was trying to expand the opportunities to all people who are hard of hearing and deaf. And your question touched something in me, and I know I'm going over my time limit, because it took me back to a student I had in my class who was deaf and had contracted another disease in which he would slowly lose his sight. I don't know where he is today. But I surely hope that there's somebody looking out for him. And I would hope that any intention of this legislation would not prevent somebody from being able to communicate with their child.
Thanks, Jody, for coming up and asking. You know, this is one of these bills here that surfaces out of nowhere for us. I mean, on the Senate side, that was a House bill, and I hadn't heard a word about this until just a few weeks ago, and I got these emails, and they were about 50-50. So I was trying to understand what this debate was about, what the division was about. And these are the things we talk about. You know, we all have issues of our own. We talk about what goes on the front pages and stuff, but something like this, when it surfaces, those that it affects, this is the number one thing that they're concerned about. And I had, Thursday, I had some individuals came into my office about this House Bill 1367. And they were explaining to me, I'm trying to get the grasp of what this legislation is about and why there's such a division in it. And I was talking to Sarah a while ago, and I want to thank Sarah for being here today and providing this service. Thank you very much, Sarah. You know, a lot of us that aren't involved in this don't understand the dynamics behind it. But as I understand it, that it could take away from the ability to teach sign language, and more emphasis on reading lips and the, if I may say this correctly, cochlear implants. And so it's a critical bill. It is a very serious bill because it affects human lives here and their lifestyles. At this point, I got to tell you, I may be premature, but I'm inclined to oppose this bill because the fact that I don't want to see individuals not have the ability to read sign language, which is probably the predominant form of communication for folks that have hearing impairments and that are deaf. So, and I said earlier before we started here, if any of you want to meet with me after the meeting and describe and discuss that with me, I'd be happy to hear more about it. These are the things that legislators, for myself anyway, are not fully aware of what the impact is. And so that's why I want to hear from folks that it will have an effect in their lives. And so just wanted to share that with everybody here, that this is a sample of some of the things that goes on at the legislature. It's not always about bill making either. It's about these kind of discussions. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Rican.
Thank you. I had the fortune of walking through the General Assembly when actually this was being discussed, and I sat down to listen, and it appeared to me over and over again that the entire discussion really should not have come to the floor at this point, because even the discussion of the makeup of the committee that is going to be doing the decision making isn't in agreement of the folks that are affected by it. So it's one of those bills that needs to be put into a study committee, that folks from all over the state have hearings in different part of the state, in my opinion, because it affects populations all over the state that will not be coming to Indianapolis. We need to hold it, and the folks that are directly involved need to work out most of the issues, because it is a matter of resources and dividing of resources. It's a philosophy, a style of life. It's a cultural issue. It's not something that should come to our floor at this point. So I'm hoping that it is put aside right now.
I would just say that I think Senator Toms is right. we are not as involved in this as we are other issues, and we don't hear from a lot of people, obviously. But the majority of the emails that I have had from my district are opposed to this piece of legislation. Now, that's not to say that I'm not getting emails from Indianapolis folks, but I don't represent Indianapolis. So I'll be looking to the folks that I do represent as to how I vote. But I really think it's ended up being a turf battle. And there's some heavy hitters involved in this that you're not aware of. Let me just put it that way. And I think it's unfortunate, and I agree with Representative Regan on this particular issue. I don't think this is something that the General Assembly ought to even be dealing with this at this point, unless it's to study the issue and have people from all over the state have input on this decision beforehand rather than after the fact.
Okay, thank you. The next question, and this was bound to happen, but I have a last name that I'm probably going to mispronounce, so apologies in advance. A question from Bruce Ungatheme, and you can correct me when you come to the mic, about Senate Bill 174.
My name is Bruce Ungatheme. I'm a resident of Vandenberg County, and I was interested to see what the status of State Bill 174 is. My understanding is it has passed the Senate and now resides in a committee in the House. And my understanding is that it is unlikely to get out of committee in the next week or so, which means it will not make it through the session this year. Now, Representative Crouch indicated that it is still, what was the term, live language. My second question is if it doesn't get out of that House committee and doesn't go before the House floor, and I guess the question is to the two senators here, is there a way, or how can we take that live language and put it into another bill that's actually moving forward so that this language can be approved in this session? It is critical for the folks in Vandenberg County that this happen in this session because the vote on consolidation will occur this November. By having this legislation not go through session this year and having it happen next year is like closing the barn door after the horse is already gone, because the people in Vandenberg County are going to be required to vote on this come November as to whether they want to consolidate local city government and county government. This bill requires that a fiscal impact study be done for that consolidation. Unfortunately, in Vandenberg County at this point in time, there has been no fiscal impact study done on the consolidation effort. There is no information that tells the voter whether this will adversely affect or otherwise affect their taxes and their services. So how is the voter supposed to make a determination of whether they want to be consolidated or not when they don't know how it's going to impact them? It's kind of like the Nancy Pelosi thing. We have to vote on it to find out what's in it. I don't think we want to do that here in Vandenberg County. The other part of that bill, the other part of the bill is the requirement for a threshold vote, an independent threshold vote of both chambers, both the county and the city. That is very important because, as B.J. Watts indicated, that doing this on a countywide vote alone and having twice as many people in the city vote as in the rural community would be akin to a hostile takeover. Now, that's his words when he was president of the city council pushing this thing through, and he voted for it. So I want to know, what can we do to get this completed this year? If it doesn't go through the House committee and doesn't get to the House floor, then how can we get this language attached to a Senate bill to get it passed yet this year with an effective date of July 1, 2012. Thank you.
Bruce, I want to thank you for coming up and testifying in our committee on that. It was in utilities. That was a, and this is what I ask folks to do, just like what Bruce did. Take the time to really get involved in something like this that affects everybody. He took the days to come up here and travel that far to testify on behalf of this. I don't know right now on 174 if there's something that we can scramble to find it to put it in. I'll talk to Senator Lawson about that. It was her bill. And I thought it was a pretty good bill. I think the sticker was that date, the January or the July date. And so I don't know what's happened to it when it got in the House. I don't know what's taken place over there, but it is a very important measure. And I think there's another one or two communities in Indiana that's dealing with the same similar situation. Isn't that correct?
There's
two
counties
of them
right now,
right.
Delaware and Vanderbilt.
Right.
Both this fall.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll find out what I can, and if you want to continue to email me on it, Bruce, anything I get, I'll relay back to you, and you can let everybody else know too.
We've got an update from the House side.
It did not get a hearing in the committee, so it will be up to Jim. No, it did get a hearing in the committee, so it's technically, and we're not going to meet again for that committee.
As Representative Crouch indicated earlier, it's still alive, but unless we have support from a House member on the conference committee, it's dead. You have to have, as she said earlier, you'll have a Republican and a Democrat on both sides of the aisle in both houses that will be meeting with the conference committee, 4 people, but those 4 people have to agree on the language. So if the House didn't hear the bill, I don't know, that may have just been a committee chairman's decision, or it may have been leadership's decision. But I will just tell you that the author of the bill said specifically it did not include Vanderbilt County. It would not, the date, she was not supportive of the date, moving that date, because she did not want it to apply to an existing vote. So I don't know. I would say that the chances of it getting something done, again, it would depend on the 4 conferees, and certainly we can talk to Senator Lawson about it, but it also would depend on the House conferees agreeing as well.
Well, I guess this is a situation where I think it's just discriminating against Vanderbilt County. It's really difficult for me to accept why the date can't go back to July and allow the same procedure and the same vote threshold that all the other counties are going to get in the state of Indiana. And Delaware has their own. They're okay. Delaware's all right. Hamilton County, I think, is also in this mix, and they may be one reason why they don't want it changed. But we deserve the right to have the same rules and regulations that are going to be applicable to the other counties. So I have to figure it's folks that have a lot of power and influence here who are saying we don't want to change it because we think it's going to fail if you go under this new bill. So that's exactly what I think is happening. And I remember years ago when the Meridian Street statute was the only way that you could get an historic preservation district in the state, and they soon discovered that it was not fair, and they set up a new legislation to make it fair for everyone. We actually, our historic preservation, because we were one of the first, was under that statute. That's what's going to happen here. People are going to understand that it wasn't the right vote. We should have been included like every other county.
A follow-up, if this doesn't go through this year and Vanderbilt County actually goes to a vote in November, is there anything that the state can do, assuming this, everybody that I've talked to indicates that this legislation that's going through is a good legislation for the entire state. Right. Is there anything that the state can do to delay the vote in Vanderbilt County until this becomes law so that we can all be treated equally in the state of Indiana and all have the same rights as the rest of the state? Because I have talked to lawyers who indicate that if this happens and Vanderbilt County and Delaware County and maybe Hamilton County are treated differently than the rest of the state, there is the opportunity to take this before the Supreme Court. And I can't remember the exact term, but it had something to do with class legislation. And they said, if this goes forward without this, then there, in all likelihood, will wind up being a lawsuit against it. So Is there a way that the state can tell these counties, look, we're making a change, wait on that vote until this change is made?
I'll try to answer that. I'm not sure. If the bill doesn't pass, then it's not going to apply to any other county this year.
Right.
So it wouldn't be that every other county has an advantage over Vanderburgh County, because their proposed consolidation is a result of House Bill 1362, which we passed a few years ago, that allows a county to choose to consolidate if they want to under certain circumstances. If 174 doesn't pass, then you don't have, I don't think there is recourse through litigation because it's not part of the statute. As far as the state, I don't think the state can intervene on an issue that's already passed as a result of the legislation that passed several years ago, where they are choosing to do something. I just doubt that that's going to be applicable in this situation, because they were very careful not to include Vanderburgh County initially. I mean, even Senator Lawson said it would not apply to Vanderburgh County. But I also understand that if it passed, and I heard the same thing that you did, it could possibly be a source of litigation.
Yes. Do you know, or does anybody understand why they want to exclude Vanderburgh County from this state bill? Sounds discriminatory to me.
There's just a lot of, there is a strong desire by people of great influence to make sure that the bill does not affect Vanderburgh County, so that we can go ahead and have the vote and basically become consolidated, because it's in favor of consolidation now.
I think that's. I don't know. I think it ought to apply to everybody, but I also know that there are players that have concerns about changing the statute that was in force when they went to the process that they went to.
Just one final, it doesn't change anything except for how you count the votes. So nothing that would have taken place to date, even the fiscal impact wouldn't have anything. The fiscal impact study wouldn't have anything. It would just be changing the vote and how you would aggregate those votes after they are taken
Correct.
on election day.
And a fiscal impact study was completed.
Right.
And it indicated that there is no fiscal impact to any of the counties, including Vanderburgh County, if they should happen to choose to change the way they tabulate the vote. It's the same number of people voting. All votes are tabulated by precinct. It's a matter of putting these precincts in this group and these precincts in this group.
I think we're going to have to leave it there. We've got 15 minutes left. For the students who are here, this is what's called sausage making that you're observing. So, in-depth look at the legislative process. So let's move on to a question about preventing juvenile delinquency.
You guys have been talking about tragedies over the last couple years on dead children, etc. This is 30 years that the legislators at the state, local, and federal levels have ignored. There was an article in the paper about custody rules get overhauled. It said that the joint custody bill was a revamp of the 2003. Well, in 2003, they told us that the lawyers' lobby had shut it down. My question is, how can the lawyers' lobby shut down a constitutional right? First Amendment right to assemble with our kid. The Indiana Supreme Court passed the 1988 Parenting Time Guidelines, which set up the visitation guidelines, which have been violated for the last 22 years that I've been back home. Now, you're talking about tragedies and dead children, and I think Carol Davis actually got your attention a couple weeks ago. But some of the stuff that you guys brought up were children's, bring the people together, human trafficking, the juvenile delinquency, putting the juvenile children in adult facilities, which is ridiculous, and laws to protect the innocent. Since 1990, USHHS Secretary Sullivan has said 70% of our juvenile delinquents in long-term corrections come from fatherless homes. There's a 77% denied visitation rate. So if you guys want to do any prevention, stop the juvenile delinquency, stop these parents from killing their kids because they don't have a clue on how to be a parent, then maybe you'd better start enforcing the law. And all I've ever heard for 22 years is, it's not my job, we can't do a state investigation, and all these other things that you do on every other issue. So, the question is, are you going to start protecting the children?
Your responses, yes.
Thank you, Roger. My bill I talked about does not place them in the adult facility.
That's why I said thanks.
That's the problem that's there
Right.
now, and we're
Yeah.
trying to fix that so it can provide services to those kids. To give you a few statistics, 84% of juveniles that commit some sort of crime as an adult are out on the streets at 21 years old, and about 95% of them are out by 25. And the reason behind this bill was really those kids in Indiana, if they're being placed in that adult facility, there's no opportunity for them to get rehabilitated. So, and additionally, when you're placing a child, they're still a child in an adult facility. They weren't getting the services that they need educationally. There was no special ed services. There was nothing there for them. And I think that this is a good step in trying to remedy that situation. It wasn't an easy bill to get to where it is today. There was a lot of maneuvering that had to take place, a lot of discussions that took place with prosecutors. The prosecutors were upset that the judges had the right to do this and that. And so it did take a lot of wrangling to try to get to where I am as far as protecting those kids. You might have heard it also in the news, and I know I don't have a whole lot of time, but I assume you're referencing the recent discussions on the Department of Child Services. I am the sponsor of House Bill 286, which is going to be heard on the House floor next week. And this bill has garnered some attention from the other side as looking at attempts to protect our kids. And that's the sole source behind this bill. The DCS was separated from FSSA in 2005. And a lot of attention was brought to the kids through the newspapers in Indianapolis and South Bend. And I'm happy that they have done that. I'm happy that people are drawing attention. But what I would like is a little more transparency in those reports that were done in the Star and South Bend Trib, because a lot of those deaths of those children that were in those newspapers occurred before the separation, before 2005. There were some that occurred afterwards, but there was no documentation of when these cases took place. So it's making it appear as if DCS is a horrible institution, and it's not and I'm not here to defend, or it's not my duty or my responsibility to do that. But the transparency with which a lot of this information is coming out right now isn't exactly accurate.
Thank you. One more sentence.
Okay. This bill, 286, is another step. I carried one last year, I'm carrying one this year, to further align the Department of Child Services to serve our kids better. It's an accountability bill. It has rules and regulations in it that try and make an effort on a daily basis to better improve the system for our kids. Because I think all people will agree that one death of a child is too many. But the bill is a good bill, and it's an attempt to try to fix our system even better and serve our kids.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, and we always appreciate and look for the advocacy on the part of everyone regarding children, and the issues are complex, that's for sure. And I appreciate the House Bill 286, because I think there are a lot of things that are going to be cleared up and improved with 286. One being that the records that are now thrown away after 6 months will be continued for years and years until the youngest child is 24. That's going to help us a lot. It's going to help us a lot. The issue that I was concerned about, and I want to make sure that we understand that we don't leave with a little of the wrong information. The children that have been in the newspaper has been from 2007 on. The 2 dozen deaths have been from 2007 on. So it has been 2 years after the split. And I don't want to point fingers. I don't think that gets us anywhere. What we need to do is all join together and improve the system, whether it's the hotline or it's DCS, whatever it is, it just needs to be improved, including the custody issues and improving our parenting.
Sure, Senator Thomas.
Roger, I know you've been involved in this for many, many years, and your question, I know you're concerned about the visitation, and in fact, I was talking to a family this week about grandparent visitation rights as well, where the child is holding their grandkids as pawns, keeping the grandparents from visitations. But also the question sounded like it was about juvenile delinquency, and I just want to mention that on my flyer here, you'll see on the back about a juvenile detention program for Polsey County. Some months ago, I had a family that was asked me to visit with them and talk to me about their situation, their family situation with a 16-year-old. It was a horrible family matter. And last Friday, a week ago yesterday, I made arrangements, and Wendy, Representative McNamara helped me on this too. She was sitting on the meeting, but we arranged for the Posey County Sheriff and the prosecutor and the Chief of Police in Mount Vernon, and we had juvenile correction people there. We had also, I had 3 folks from DLC, from Department of Corrections from Indianapolis, came all the way down to be with us in on this meeting to see about the possibility of establishing a juvenile detention center in Polsey County. The folks there, and I've talked to Sheriff Oath about this, that right now these young teenagers that get in trouble in the late hours of the night, there's nothing really they can do with them. I mean, they're not allowed to put them in the jail with adult prisoners. They pick them up, they do some paperwork on them, and pretty much turn them loose again. And that's the common knowledge up there, and these kids have really no incentive to really try to get their act together. And that was one of the intentions of having this meeting, so that maybe we could start that process. And I know there's programs that Posey County needs to maybe try to implement, and also work toward establishing facilities, so that there was testimony and discussions about how sometimes a parent is just so they can't do nothing with their teenagers anymore. They don't want them back home. And where does that kid go? And if we don't do something with that child's going to wind up being incarcerated in prison. That's a burden we all bear too on the cost of the taxpayers. So I'm hoping
that's time. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to just wrap up your thought?
Well, okay. I'm hoping that we can accomplish this kind of a goal, but it's something we all need to work at. But also we have to remember too. I have to ask, and this comes up a lot. Where's the family? Where's the parents involved in? When does the parents take upon themselves to take care of their children, to help them and nurture them along? That kids do get in trouble, but there's a responsibility and obligation as a parent too to be involved in this, and sometimes that's lacking. And government can't fill that slot.
Okay, we've got about 3 minutes left. If we can move quickly, we can have one more question, and that's actually the last one. So this is from Marvin Byers about Senate Bill 344, and let's make this one quick.
Very much. I'm Marvin Byer. I'm with the Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio Regional Council of Carpenters, and I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters as well. My concern is we had a bill, a contentious bill that was passed this year in hopes that it would create new opportunities for jobs. And now we have a project that is ready to go. It'll create 1,000 construction jobs for 3 years. It'll create another 200 permanent jobs, and not counting all the jobs that will be created from the service industries. So I guess my concern is now that that there's tax incentives being taken away, I'm concerned, is this going to stop this project? Because our members really need this project. So I have more to say, but I'm trying to cut it short.
Thank you. Yeah, and if we could maybe do 1-minute responses to this, just keep it real short.
The coal gasification, Indian.
Coal gasification.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
This is a real complicated issue, as they know, and it's basically that if the price of natural gas as a commodity is high, then the state's going to benefit. But if the price is low of gas, it could prove to be detrimental to the Hoosier consumers, and that is because that after, in 2009, this bill went through and syngas was out there, and we thought, oh, this is great because of natural gas prices. Well, new science came in, and they're fracking, so-called. They're releasing the natural gas in greater quantities. It's becoming very competitive on the market with a lower price. There are estimates that this is going to cost, because we have to pay, as everybody in here, whether you're going to use syngas or not, is going to be involved in making up the difference if this is not a product that is equitable. So it's a situation that costs all of us, and we have to look at it. And I don't have all the information. I just received this. Vectren is actually out there trying to make sure that we change this situation. Vectren projects that syngas would most likely cost gas customers in Indiana more than $1.6 billion over the 30 years of the contract. We need to all really understand syngas, and I will be studying it, I promise you, before the vote comes.
And I think that's all we've got time for this edition of Meet Your Legislators. We want to thank all the legislators for coming out and for being a part of this process. And most especially, a big thank you to all of you for coming and being a part of this democratic process. Thanks so much.